Good morning. I want to ramble off the cuff a little bit, talking about information and disinformation. I just picked up, because I subscribe to Substack, Glenn Greenwald, and he does a 58-minute video on some show called Morning Joe that I've actually heard of, where he talks about Claire McCaskill and Joe Scarborough, who are disinforming the public about the nature of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. I never got bent out of shape about WikiLeaks or Assange. I've heard it said that he's accused of being a sexual predator, and I know he's been in exile for at least 5 years. I think Vienna. I have a vague idea of a building and him staring out of a window or something like that. But anyway, Assange, like other folks, have gotten into the business of trying to be one-man democracy. And it does start with one person, one individual's courage. And they're taking on institutions. And that's an asymmetric warfare that in the long term is won by institutions. And the difficulty in that challenge is to intersect a large enough spread of population with some true information or some factual information that people can process into political action. And that's very difficult. There's a lot of thermodynamics, or what I call information thermodynamics, involved in keeping the truth active. What we in the business intelligence industry call actionable information is the most important information out of all the data that you could possibly collect. And what you need is someone to process it rationally in a trackable way. In a digital system that accounts for its provenance and can be recreated independently. And right now, that is something that none of the major media have or use very well. And the people that do that the best are the guys at Bellingcat, Bellingcat, I think .org or .com. Try it either way. But basically, there's a digital provenance and forensics activity that has to be done, and it can be done in a better way. Greenwald is probably one of the first a journalist with a large audience who I think understands that just because of what he has done with Snowden before. And I basically thought that Greenwald was shrill and I guess he has to be in order to capture the attention of the audiences that are large enough to move facts into the brainstorming that it takes to do some political strategizing around what needs to be done about those facts. So again, the energy required to sustain a democratic movement is something that is not happening now well. And one aim of mine is to at least make available those tools and technologies that will enable that. And I kind of expected when Bezos bought the Washington Post that he might begin to do something like that. But I haven't seen any evidence. So the mainstream media is still technologically behind. Interestingly enough, a lot of focus is on Facebook because Facebook has editors. And one of my favorite sci-fi authors, Neil Stephenson, went into this in detail in Dodge in Hell, which is the book prior to the one that's currently out there, Termination Shock, where he talks about the consequences of people not having the affluent means to have personal editors, because Here's the key. This is where I put bold underline in a short paragraph. The ability of an institution to produce false information is far greater than the ability of any individual to absorb, assimilate, make sense of, and do something about that information. So, unless you're really in a disciplined supply chain of data, and it's actionable data, and you know what a good action based on the right data is going to give you, you're shit out of luck, basically. Because there's just far too much information for anybody on the planet to consume as an individual. And there's far too little discipline in the way that data is managed in the public sphere right now. So what I think we can learn, and this is something, I'm not saying all of this is impossible. I'm saying it's not put together in a way that works for democracy right now, because there's so many other ways to monetize a disciplined thermodynamic ecosystem of information and intelligence. Right now, it's a state operation, but the tools of those state operations and institutional operations are available for free. You need some compute resources, and everybody should have some. But right now, it's just monetized in different ways that do not necessarily serve the needs and purposes of democracy, of democratic political action. So what has to happen is that people who are interested in the preservation of democracy need to get in touch with those people with those skill sets and in those institutional practices and make a difference. And of course, I'm trying to do that at freeblackthought.com. And we're getting somewhere. It's a slow and long climb up that hill. But I was going to mention gamers. What gamers understand is a lore and a narrative. And you cannot sustain interest in a video game for more than a short period of time if it doesn't have a consistent lore and a consistent narrative and something that people can negotiate their way with. And the advantage of social media and of gaming and of interactive media in general in this information revolution is that you are walking down a very particular path. This is a new way of instruction that not a lot of people get. And it's not as good in terms of shortcutting as a professor in a classroom, but it's much better than a professor in a classroom in terms of what can be done autonomously in a person's free time. And so you'll have people who have studied or have played video games, let's say, I don't know, 3 hours a week for years. And a lot of players do a lot more than that. But then there's a disciplined path that it writes through your brain so that you actually know. If you play Halo, you know what the Master Chief is like. You know what his enemies are like. You know what he has to go through. You know what information he has to process. And you know how to transfer that information into tactical and strategical political process. And again, like I said, we don't have that gamified discipline in democratic actions right now, and that's what we need to do. So the thing again, the bold paragraph is an institution has much more power to sustain the thermodynamics of information into action or data into action than any individual is capable of doing. And when I talk about this is when I say I have 124,000 pictures. I have something on the order of 1,900 albums in digital. And a computer can handle that easily, but that's my whole world of pictures. That's pictures that I've taken for 20 years or the essays that I've written for 20 years. So that's a massive amount of information that's produced, and it's easily disseminated, and it can be done in a controlling way. Right now, it's done in a controlling way by intelligence agencies and by useful idiots and by partisan journalists and editorial boards, and that's very difficult for anybody without direct institutional discipline to weave their way through that. And so this kind of boils down in another way to self-sufficiency. And I'll wrap this up. Uh, if you live in a modern, weird country, there's a lot of information that's going to hit you. And it's going to be difficult for you to, well, it'll be easy to satisfy your appetite. And of course, you'll get tired and you'll need some entertainment and things that calm your mind as well. Some meditation, perhaps. If you don't know, if you're not an expert, if you haven't, an expert, I mean a practitioner, a practitioner with results, with a certain type of information or set of kinds of facts, then you have to reach out as a noob and get it from what you believe is an authoritarian or authentic source or a credible source. And it's more than most people can do. You have to be very smart and very crafty. If, let's say, you've read 500 books, then you're probably at the level of literacy that's necessary to parse through bad writing and bad logic. Or if you're in a scientific discipline in the hard sciences, then you have a good logical parsing machine in your head. Or if you're a psychologist, you probably have a good idea when people are dissembling. So again, you need some kind of expertise in dealing with random information so that you can organize it well for yourself. And that's what we need to enable groups in order to do. And when you're not self-sufficient, you're really hungry for that information. And the chances that you're going to select something that's actually good for you are very slim because there's so much out there. And there's so many people pursuing so many agendas in a disciplined way that are trying to convince you to your side. The dark ages that I talk about when I write have everything to do with the fact that everything has become politicized, and all expertise serves in this new media revolution for likes. It's an economy of attention, and that's not what we need. We need a practical economy. And I think people who live, let's say, in Oklahoma and don't consume or are in agriculture or some business that doesn't depend on you getting information from elsewhere. That's why I talk about self-sufficiency. They have an advantage because they're able to quickly dismiss a lot of shows like Morning Joe or The View or whatever the mass media consume in terms of information that they think is relevant to the democratic process in the United States. So that's just a quick overview of what I say is the challenge to individuals in the infospheres and in social media and in information that they need perhaps to get along in society without having the proficiency of being a practitioner. So that's my video for today. Thanks for listening. Take care.